Best for them, so that, then we can decide. And if it's a mixture, then we can adapt. We can do some before, we can do some during, and so forth. But that's what we wanted to drive, because with the ESSERs, you need the family and community input. So that's what we want to see, and we're going to do that survey.
And we're looking at starting this up October 18th.
Yep.
Mr. Sutton, how many students are participating in this remediation program?
We don't know yet. We don't have.
How many were last year were identified as need?
That's really hard to say. I don't have those numbers in front of me. I mean, I would go. The numbers I would use would be the end of the year benchmark data. I would guess anywhere between, and I'm guessing, I would guess anywhere between 25 to 40 on the high end.
Students or percent?
Grade level.
Percent. Percent or students?
Those are students.
Students. And typical grade level has how many students in it?
About
170?
140, 150.
So a little more than 10%, less than 20?
About that, and I mean that would make sense. I mean, when you're looking at tiers, I mean usually your tier 1 is 80% of the students, so your tier 2 and tier 3 encompass about 20%.
So when we look at our performance from the state level, from PDE, and we've been on you're supposed to be either, hitting the mark, you got warning level number 1 and warning level number 2. And we're hitting warning level number 2 on some of our areas. So the question is, why so many of our students are going through our education program during their normal classroom and still needing remediation? What are we not doing during the classroom time that creates this need for remediation?
I think there's a number of factors. I mean, I can't pinpoint one. I mean, I can only speak for grades K to 2. I mean, we're implementing a couple of new programs as far as phonemics and really reading strategies. As a matter of fact, this year we're doing something called ECRI, which stands for Enhanced Core Reading Instruction, and we're really looking on honing in on kindergarten, first grade, those basic fundamental phonemic skills that kids need to put together in order to be fluent readers. But for other areas, I couldn't answer that question.
But we have all three here in the classroom, and this is the academic committee meeting. So basically what our job is as board of directors, committee members, is we're holding our government officials providing these free and educational benefits to these students. And our goal is to be efficient with that implementation of these educational benefits. A kid should be able to come into school, go to his classroom, and leave at a standard. That's the purpose of our mission here, right? Are we all in agreement with that mission? They should be able to walk into the school, get educated to the standard at least, not being fall behind or below or anything else, and leave the school with a standard met. So the question becomes, during that classroom time, what are we not doing to make sure that every student meets those standards? And if we're not investigating that as a board, to ask you the 5 whys, the root cause. Do we look at these, more than 10% of our students that are not meeting that requirement? And you look at 3 things. It's always people and a process and.
Yeah, I think, every student is individual, so everybody has, a different background, a different, exposure. So there's a number of factors, but you're right. Every child that walks into my building, I want them to find at least
Proficient.
A proficient level of success. So that's why we're constantly looking. Every year. I've been here.
But we're not doing we're not doing it as a root cause analysis to decide. Here's 10% or more of our students in a particular grade, per grade, all the way up to K through 12, that need to be evaluated. Management of this entity. But if we had a 10% failure rate or a 10% unsuccessful rate within any private sector entity, we'd be out of business. So when we look at it on our side, I think we're accepting this concept that we can always just add more time, more money, more effort to an individual, when we really could look at the root cause of the problem and say, what do we need to do to increase the ability for everyone within that classroom to meet this standard? And it could be resources in the classroom level, but it sounds like we're throwing more teacher time at the problem. And if we're throwing more teacher time at the problem, and the same amount of teacher time was not successful originally, is more teacher time and the same thing really a solution to that root cause problem.
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the things, just to jump in, actually, that I wanted to share at the
And
end.
what's your name again?
Lauren Courtney.
Okay.
That I wanted to share at the end, and I talked to Mr. Sevlin about it. I just finished a week-long training last week from the Apple Group. They're based out of Arkansas, and it is called Connections OG in 3D, and it's a dyslexia training, but it is actually a program that can be used whole group, or you can utilize it as intervention. And I know myself and 3 other staff members at the elementary center are now trained in it. And Mr. Sevlin, I talked to him, and others have talked, and just a ton of success. And I am in love. I cannot wait to utilize this program. But I know Sam, Mrs. Kistler, myself, and Crystal Ursulak, one of the learning support teachers at the elementary center, we were able to participate in the training paid through a grant. I'm not sure Missy and Ashley, how they were the first ones with a grant as well. But it is a program that, this is my reference book. So this is all research that this program has done. These are all the lessons, and as you can see, I've got all my materials, but it's a hands-on. And I can talk more about it, but I think that this is potentially something that we could look into. It starts with making sure the kids know how to read. I think that the curriculums that we have do a good job, but I think this focuses more in-depth and is hands-on, and there's tons of research behind it. I have pictures on my phone from the slides they shared of the progress that kids had through DIBELS on their success. So I don't think it's something that we're not doing. I think it's something that we are doing. I just don't know that we're completely encompassed there yet. So this is one way that the district, to share out, has helped us as staff, some of us, to move into, view this program, be trained in this program, to see the effects of it. And I think that this is something that we may look into talking about for future as a potential for.
And that's a great potential solution once a problem has been defined. Prior to that definition of the problem, which is staff training, I'd like to go back to the original, to stay on topic. If you look at it as a root cause analysis, these 10% in each grade, our principal at each school, our teachers in each class, they should be asked this question: what makes this student meet the standard and this student not meet the standard? And then look at it from either, is it that the teacher and the student don't see eye to eye and therefore don't communicate well, at which point adding some communication skills would benefit either the teacher and or the student? Is it the fact that they don't have the same type of learning experience? Is it this kid tends to be a more visual learner, we need more visual aids, therefore the classroom supplies are short, and therefore that would aid this process. But I think if you spent the money looking at the root cause of the problem first, really defining the root cause, and then understanding that if these are the root causes that this room compiles to say, these are the things we want to resolve, then we look to the professional staff and that opportunity from your program that you want to that says, this program might have these resources to help those students. Then you get to measure whether or not they were successful. Right now, it seems like from a decade of watching this, that a lot of things get thrown against the wall and they're beautifully tossed, but they don't seem to provide that success rate. And it looks like we're actually sliding as a district instead of growing as a district. When you look at your standardized testing, is all they really give us to use as a metric. If we want to use a different metric inside of our school, we have that ability. We have that control if we want. And you can only control what you measure. So if we measured that first and then looked at it from an individual standpoint of this classroom, and if we find that, let's say, teacher A or teacher B is lacking certain resources, teacher A is lacking a communication skill, and then even if we move students around, when we find this conflict or this concern, either from a teacher standpoint or a student standpoint, we can better manage the free and public education they're supposed to be getting, because these resources are supposed to follow the student. And I don't think this board or this organization has ever looked at it from that standpoint, because I see you're spending tons of money, energy, and effort, but it seems like you're on a treadmill doing the same things that's been doing. And I think without actually evaluating it first, solving and defining a mutual agreed problem that needs to be resolved, and then picking things that would resolve it, and then testing whether or not that actually accomplished the task, are you going to get ahead? Does everybody agree with that standard
Well,
process of root
I'll
cause?
agree to this, Mr. Bradley. I mean, I don't want to belabor the point. I want to, move on to the next levels. But I think you hit the nail on the head a little bit earlier. You had given a couple of different factors, and that's the uniqueness of all the kids. They fall under those different umbrellas that you were talking about. So what I try and do, what we try and do, is we're constantly looking for what is it. What is that one piece? So, that's why we do try and implement different programs, that we do try and get some professional development. We're trying to figure out exactly what it is. What makes it so that, a student has an inordinate amount of tardiness or attendance? What is it that may have, where is it in our reading curriculum that might fall a bit short in the area of comprehension? Like, we're always looking for those things. We're always trying to pinpoint exactly where it is that, Steve may fall a little bit shorter, but Floyd at the same time is doing fantastic. So we're always, I just feel that we're always looking at that every year. Nothing is ever exactly the same from one year to the next.
Well, don't take it defensive. Take it more as an opportunity. Look at it as an evaluation that something is broken, or something is worn out, or something is wearing out. And if it is being worn and wear out, how can we prevent that from happening? How can we prevent this identifying 10% of our students as not meeting the standard or needing remedial training, and change the input, which is when we have that teacher, we evaluate how they're doing it in relationship to the different ones that may or may not be successful. And whereas you guys are a team, you should look at it as a team and everybody collects this data. If you're not collecting the data and everybody's trying to solve the problem themselves, that's where some management comes in and actually looks at the problem from a whole, collects the right data. So if you're telling me that, let's pretend your classroom of 160 kids has 15, 10% that are needing remedial training, of those, how many are this, how many were this, how many were this? And if we're not getting that data, and we don't need individual student information, we look at big picture view. If we have this many students having this problem spread out through this school district, we can resolve that. That's not a big problem to solve. It looks like we're not really trying to solve the problem as much as finding ways to consume the money. And that's where I think you're making a managerial, wait a second, excuse me, sir. I think that's where we're making a managerial, excuse me, sir, I think you're missing the point. I think that's where you're missing, I think that's where you're missing, that's fine. I think you're missing the managerial oversight responsibility. That if we don't challenge and question ourselves as to why, and ask that why question a couple times deep to really find out what's happening. The tardy is a perfect example. If a student asks why they're tardy, well, they didn't set the alarm. Why didn't they set the alarm? Well, they didn't have one. Right? Why don't they have one? Right? Where's the responsibility in the system? So some of these things can be resolved very effortlessly if we just do a root cause analysis. If you're telling me that this has been done, that's fine. We have not seen a single bit of data as a board, and I've been watching for 10 years at this district, and yet we still see a sliding slope of performance. If we don't turn that around, we're going to struggle, and these kids are the ones that are suffering. So go
I
ahead.
think you're, again, unfortunately missing the point, is number one, you cannot compare private to what we do.